Well, Diana Yashuki, welcome everybody. Trying to practice my language right now, which is unfortunate with my gutturals not being so great. But my name is Maggie Lorenz. I am the Executive Director for Lower Phalen Creek Project, and I'm really happy that you all are here this evening to share in community conversation with us in our last program of our three-part series, Reimagining Indian Mounds Park. We are really happy that we're able to hold this space to have these really important conversations, to kind of talk about some really big and important changes I think that are coming to the community, or that have been kind of set in motion in the community at this space that we now call Indian Mounds Regional Park. But over the last number of years, and even prior to that, but there's been a lot of momentum, I would say, over the past 5 to 7 years or so, to reimagine how we interact with the space. So we wanted to host these conversations to help bring some of the information that have been happening in these meetings with the city and the tribes and to different community members. We wanted to bring up some of this information to the larger community to help inform, and then also as we come together to kind of reimagine this space and how the community will interact with this space in the future. And so again, my name is Maggie. I'm with Lower Phalen Creek Project. We're an environmental nonprofit organization here on the east side, and we provide stewardship to Wakantipi, also known as Bruce Stunto Nature Sanctuary, Indian Mounds Regional Park, and other green spaces like Sweet Hollow and Lake Phalen, Pig's Eye, for example. So we work in those areas, and as a native-led organization, we also do that environmental work through a cultural lens. And so I have our cultural educator here with me tonight, Fern Renville, who is going to kind of set the tone a little bit for this conversation by opening up with some teachings and just sharing some knowledge from a cultural perspective about this landscape that we're going to be talking about and focusing on this evening. And then after Fern, we'll turn it over to Ellen from the city of St. Paul, who will talk about this cultural landscape study that was completed in 2020. And some elements have been completed, some elements are in progress, some elements of the plan are down the line in the future, so we'll kind of go through all of that. But logistically, before we get to that, for those of you who might be new to this space, I just wanted to let you know that restrooms, if you're looking for them, are on either side. You can go down the elevator or down the stairs, and there you'll find restrooms down one level down. We do have parking validation, so grab that on your way out the door from the registration table. And also at the registration table were some evaluation forms. We would really love it if you guys could fill those out. Just let us know how you enjoyed the program, and if there was anything that we could have done differently to help you feel more welcome, or if there were things that you wish you would have learned about tonight that we missed, so that we can better provide this kind of programming. So with all of that said, I will turn it over to Fern.
Thank you, Maggie. Good evening. Fern Naomi Renville Emakiabiye. My name is Fern Naomi Renville, Tamakota. Sisituan Wapetuan Oyate, Hamantaha. I'm from the Lake Traverse Reservation in South Dakota. Mihunkake, Rob Renville, Jan Salazar. My parents are Rob Renville and Jan Salazar. My grandparents were Joseph Renville and Naomi Renville. That's the community that I'm from, which is the community that Dakota people were displaced to, one of the communities. So I am very much representative of the majority of Dakota people who do not live in the state of Minnesota. So I've heard only 10% of Dakota people actually live in our homelands. So I have been living here for just like literally a week and a year now. And previously I lived on the West Coast, where I have been doing cultural work and education work and working in the arts. But in 2018, I got taken on a tour of the mounds by Maggie here, and something happened that day. Something happened. I heard a vision of this most sacred place in our homeland being seen as that. The idea of that, the vision of that seed got planted that day, and that was why a year ago I moved here. That's why I've happily and humbly accepted this role in the organization. And this story isn't about me, but it is about me, because our Dakota people, this place here that we're taking care of, that we're talking about, is meaningful in ways that you can't even imagine to everyone who wants to be here. So for my particular family, for the Renville family, our story is so painful, and it's hard to heal that story. But we can heal this piece of land, and that heals all of our stories. This piece of our sacred homeland sits here. It reminds us of who we are to one another. We're relatives. We're all Mitapio. And so I'm going to tell you a very short story about why that is. It's because in the very beginning, and this, by the way, is a Dakota origin story that I was taught. I understand that there are as many origin stories as there are Dakota families and bands, but this is what I learned. In the very, very beginning, before there was anything, there were only two great cosmic forces in the universe. One was a male spirit named Eon. The other was a female spirit named Hahepi. Eon possessed all the creative power of the universe, and Hahepi possessed all the creative potential of the universe. Now, these two cosmic forces may have been very different from you and I, but they also were similar to us, apparently, because they were lonely and they wanted a family, just like us. They wanted to make a community and family for themselves. And so, Eon knew that if any new beings were to be created, he would have to part with some of his own creative power. And so, they say that Eon reached into himself and removed most of that generative creative power that he alone possessed. And he shaped it like a red ball of clay and took that ball of earth and placed it into the great nothing of Hahepi, and thus Mother Earth was born. And now, so that she would not be lonely or alone or dark, Eon took out the rest of his power, gave it all up to make the heavens, to make the spirits and the stars and the moon and the sun and all the other parts of the universe that we know today. And then, now that Eon had given away all of his power to his creations, Eon had only his blood left to give. They say that he opened his veins and that this blood flowed out and down onto the surface of that newborn Mother Earth. Half of Eon's blood covered the surface of that newborn Mother Earth with the first floodwaters. And the other half of that blue blood flowed up into the sky and became the atmosphere that we breathe that protects us today. And now Eon was as we know him now. He was now powerless, small, hard, gray, shriveled. And Eon, the rock, fell to earth and became the first rock under those first floodwaters. And so, Grandmother Earth and Grandfather Rock are the ancestors of all of us. They are our parents. They are our family. So we humans are all related. We're all descendants of these two. But not just us. These trees outside, the things you see in the sky, all of creation outside this door is our relative. We are all related to them. This is the Dakota worldview that tells us that we are not separate from one another, we are not separate from nature, and we're not separate from our Creator's love and power. It's in us, and we are a part of this. And this place here represents that. And you being here tonight shows me that these ideas are alive, and they're bringing people like it brought me. So I really appreciate you all being here, and I really appreciate the work that all of our partners have done. I was just reading the daylighting plan, and Roger and I were just like amazed at the countless hours of work that must have gone into producing that. And by the work, I mean this work, talking to one another, listening to one another, learning from one another. It's powerful stuff, so we appreciate that you're all here.
Thank you. Thank you, Fern. I'm Ellen Stewart. I'm a landscape architect with the City of St. Paul, and I have been working there for 15 years. Since 2010, I've been working on Indian Mounds related projects, and it truly is an honor, and I would say that it is probably the most significant thing that I have done professionally, and I don't mean my accomplishments. It's the most significant thing I've been involved in. I don't know that there's anything that's going to come along that seems or feels more important than this. So I appreciate everybody's interest in this, and this is the third of 3 in this series. The first one, I don't know, how many people have been at all 3, or? Okay. So the first one, just a quick review of how this fits in, was about archaeophysics. Is that there? Yeah, came in and talked about the archaeology of the site and the scientific work that they had done to establish what is underground. And it was really talking about what the myths are about there not being anything significant anymore, and that the mounds aren't really, or that the mounds aren't really Dakota, or I mean, there were 3 major things that it's like, no. So they were dispelling those myths. So that was more of a scientific thing. Then the last one was about NAGPRA and the requirements to repatriate objects, funerary objects specifically, but then it also opened my mind to recognizing that it's not just funerary objects, it's also anything that is significant that has to do with celebrations or anything that is really part of the culture, and separating those things from the people that they really belong to. So that's my take on it. I mean, and they're both great sessions. This one is about the work that the city is doing. And so we are doing this work not on our own, we are doing it with partners, and it's work that's really important, and so I will try to go through it quickly, but at the same time thoroughly. I know that we want to also get on to discussion and work together to sort through some of the questions that we have prepared just to ask, and how we can continue this work and make it better. I have notes. I'm not sure how effective they're going to be on my phone, but I guess the most important thing that I wanted to say about this slide too is this is a sign that's out there right now, and it's on the pavilion, which existed and has been there since, I'm just going to say the 1930s. Maura, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but and so this is some of the work that we started to do to inform people of the significance of the site. So part of it is transforming how we are treating the site, and what the physical site looks like, but it's also transforming people's perspectives of the site, which is extremely important. So this is a graphic that was done by 10 by 10. There are consultants for the messaging work that we've been doing. Maura Rockcastle is here. So they provided this as part of the cultural landscape study and messaging plan, and it really is a great example of how this watercolor shows the Mississippi River, and it also shows the significant sites along it and the sacred sites. But just like the river and just like this watercolor, you can't put boundaries on what is sacred and what is not. And so where people consider there to be, for example, the mounds themselves, I'm assuming most people have been over there, have a fence around them. So a lot of people have this concept that that area is sacred, where it's really the whole area beyond that, not even just within the park boundaries. So I can't read that with my glasses on. So it's just important to think of it that way, and that's not necessarily how the city has been thinking about it in the past. So this next slide is talking about what I have called our tripping point. In 2010, we did a master plan for just looking at the entire park and what we're calling a park at this point in time, and what amenities we would want to have there and what amenities the community wanted. And we reached out to many people to ask them to participate. We thought we were doing a great job with community engagement. We have this document now that talks about all the different things that we should add to the site, and one of them was a splash pad. And so we asked for a grant from Met Council or from the state for the legacy funds to put in a splash pad over near where the play area is. And that was in 2016. And we were excited about it. We wanted to do something that was sensitive to the landscape, that was kind of blended in. We weren't going to do something that looked like, Valley Fair or something. But we were met with a lot of resistance and opposition as we built up towards our first meeting. And it was spread on Facebook. It was there were a lot of people within the Twin Cities area, and there were people outstate and out of state that were concerned. And I will very honestly tell you that I didn't understand the concerns, and now that I look, I do now. At that time, I thought you just need to understand what we're planning on doing, and once you hear my vision, you'll understand that we're not trying to do anything that's, gonna be really offensive. Not understanding, not putting together that this is the same time that the Dakota pipeline, or access pipeline is happening, right? There's like all this turmoil about what's happening there, and that's all about water. And then we're planning a splash pad to use a lot of water in an area that we would have to put in more utilities, and we would have to, we'd be penetrating the ground in order to do this. And we were making this like a lively recreation area. So we heard loud and clear that this is not the right thing to do. And so I am very grateful that that came up and that stopped us. It was hard when we had these conversations because it was our first meeting that was about the splash pad. We had a lot of people that came and attended that essentially testified that this is not the right thing, very upset that the city was considering doing this, very upset that they hadn't been involved in the first place in the 2010 master plan, just upset, and very understandably too. So we ended up stepping back, realizing that we need to have a broader conversation and a broader understanding of what this site is, because obviously the people that work for the city weren't getting it. And so we ended up taking that money and asking Met Council to put the money over towards doing a cultural landscape study and messaging plan. And so the idea was that instead of doing a physical change to the landscape, we would be better prepared by doing this cultural landscape study to understand the site and to be able to know what is actually sensitive, and I mean in terms of anything, any developments or anything that we were doing on the site, any changes. But it was also to look at what the different types of interventions on the landscape would be, but knowing who to talk to when you need to consult. So that's another thing about this project, is that it was not federal funds, so there's no requirement for 106. There's no requirement that, there are like major requirements when you're doing something that has to do with a trail that's funded by federal funds. And you have to have all of the study, you have to understand what's there, what's sensitive, and when you get other monies, you don't necessarily have to. But you have to. So, anyway, the other parts of the project were to look at it from a historic perspective, see what it's transpired over time, and see what the site, how it has changed, and just talk to a lot of people about what it means to them, and have some conversations. So there were definitely challenges to this, and the pervasiveness of colonialism as the lens that the city had been seeing this through was, and I have seen it through, and everybody I work with had basically seen it through, was, and still does remain an obstacle and a challenge to working with partners and to making changes to the site. I'm gonna step out here for a second. Longstanding distrust, which is completely warranted, of the government, completely understood. You know, we need to listen. We need to hear what people are saying, and not just work forward without looking back. There's also an issue of staff resources for tribal nations. So for our tribal historic preservation officers, I know they are taxed with a lot of work that is more related to doing things that are like part of the 106 process. Working with city entities that are working on neighborhood parks and other sites is not, and master planning isn't necessarily on the radar and doesn't come up to the same prominence as some of the other work that they have. So there's an issue with those resources as well, and we don't want to overtax or have expectations that aren't realistic. The city also does not have, I am funded through project funds. So the legacy funding that is paying for the cultural landscape study and messaging plan is what I get some of my time towards this project from. So once the project is over and the grant is closed out, we don't have somebody that is consistently still working towards developing and taking care of these partnerships that we're trying to work towards. So the city needs to have somebody, and it probably should be somebody outside of the parks, that's also looking at relationships. And I would suggest that it should be somebody in the mayor's office, but that's me speaking, not necessarily the city. And then, now I can't read what this is, project, oh, so that was that one, okay. And then also, like, we wanted to make sure that there was no method for working together, and so that was also a challenge. And when I say that, our community engagement work is still developing and has been over time, but it has changed immensely. And there was no real kind of structure to make sure that we were including everybody. It was more like, reach out to everybody that you can reach out to, and whoever shows up, shows up. It wasn't go to where you need to. It wasn't facilitate having conversations that you can learn from people and listen to stories. So that's also something that was a challenge. Ooh. Oh, so I was gonna just point out that the top two pictures, the first one is a mural that used to be at Ramsey County Courthouse where the city council meets, and it is of a priest speaking down to Native Americans. The other one is a sign that used to be at Indian Mounds, right by the mounds, and it talked about Hopewellian culture, and that's something that we talked about at the first meeting, that being a myth, right? Like, there was no Hopewellian culture. Hopewell was a farmer in Ohio, and so like, this is not correct. And it had been brought up at the Dote tours. I had no idea that it wasn't a real thing until I learned about it on one of the tours. And so it's like, all right, we need, like, first easy thing we need to do is just get rid of this sign. So we also removed the trail in that area that was and it's a very sensitive area. So looking at removals, the city has started to do some of that. Have we gotten there yet? No, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So in facing some of these challenges, we realized that we need to have like a different shift in perspective, and we needed to have some guidance. And what we used was the idea that Fern was speaking about, is that everything is related. So, and I'm gonna probably not say this correctly, but Metakue Oahu. Oh, close. Somebody's gotta school me on it, because I just keep saying it that way. So it's really looking at how we are all relatives and everything is connected, rather than looking at things in very siloed and compartmentalized ways. I'm not referring to my notes at all right now, so I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff. We also recognized that we needed to have more partners that we were bringing into this, and so we did work, and we have been working with a lot of different people, including the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. We've been working with the Office of State Archaeology. We've worked with Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, community members, and tribal organizations, which has been really important to bring all of these people together to have conversations. We've had listening sessions, we've had project advisory team meetings, there have been times that we've just assembled the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers to have a conversation with each other and then relay information to us. There have been interviews, and there's been a lot of research that went into this document. And I don't know, are there any documents left over there?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if everybody picked one up. They were here last time, but this is the Cultural Landscape Study and Messaging Plan. It is a very thick document. There is also an executive summary, which is much more brief, but it's very dense, but it's really important, and it is a great read, I think. So it was done really well. Maura and her group, and then Quinn Evans also worked on it. So we had a really good consultants that put it together. So in looking at the history of the site, you can see here, maybe, I don't know how well anybody can see, but I also did provide the presentation, a couple copies on each table. This was very much untouched, connected. I shouldn't say untouched. It was still very connected land. The river and the bluffs were connected. There are no roads. There are trails through here, and there are the mounds themselves, the caves, the springs. So this is 200 BC to 1829 BC. So it's during that time period that this is basically what happened, what was existing. We have oak savanna, we've got woodland, we've got some prairie. All of these things are very different today. This is the current condition. Hard to read all of those, I know, but that's everything that's going on, from tennis courts, play areas, to a pavilion, to, actually a couple of pavilions, picnic pavilions, restroom, several things that are happening here. Turf, everything there to make it as great of a recreational area as possible. When I say recreation, I mean there are trails for people to walk on and run on and ride their bikes on, but there's also, these important things that neighborhoods do need. Play areas, right? Like we want our kids to be able to have a play area. Is this the right spot? That is a no. So that's really, we have made again some progress. There is a railroad that goes through here still that separates the site from the river geographically. We did have some of that removed, and we now have Bruce Bento Park or Nature Sanctuary, and we've started to put in some more prairie, but these are just small steps that we've taken to kind of correct some of the things that have happened. But I think of the site, and I think of the importance of it, and I think of the reason. There's a hawk or something. Sorry.
I know.
The reason came up. the reason that this site is significant geographically, as I understand, and I was very glad that Fern talked about it, because I was like, I'm not gonna stand up here and talk about why the site's important or sacred. But one of the things is that it's up on these bluffs and it's connected to the river, and it's, you know, you've got the sky and you've got the river and you've got the bluffs and you've got the mounds, and this is, I mean, it's an incredible space, but right now it is cut off. Like, we've effectively cut it off from the sky with airplanes that are flying up. We've cut it off from the river with the barge traffic and the trains. And it just is not, and we've cut it off from the rest of the area that I was showing on that watercolor. You know, the area around it, now we've got a bunch of houses. And we're also taking that land and it's now monetized, right? There's a value that's put on it. And we're selling it, and it's based on a lot of those things that are sacred, right? It's wonderful because it's got the river right there. It's wonderful because it's, you know, got the park there, and it's got these cliffs, and there are all these wonderful resources. But we've monetized it, and so it's like taking away from that sacred aspect of it and privatizing things. So some of the goals for the overall planning work are listed here. I'm gonna have to like look at it on my phone. I'm really not texting anybody, I promise. The overall goals were really to honor this site and to tell the story of this site and to listen to what this site is, to welcome people, to welcome people to the place and really make sure that it's evolving, that it's shifting, and that we're making changes to it, like taking out fences, and we're taking out pathways, and taking out some of these amenities that are park-like. So really removing some of these elements, as well as when I was talking about adding signage and interpretive information. So this is the overall messaging plan, and I do hope people pick up the document and take a look at it, because just these pull-outs, these actual diagrams are really, really helpful to see what is being planned for the future. And as Maggie was saying, some of the things are changes that have happened, some of the things are changes that are happening, and some of the things are longer term out. But there is an overall plan for it, and it was developed in partnership with a lot of people and a lot of input. And there may be things that we finesse as we go along the way, as money becomes available. You know, there may be some shifts in what we want to do or what we should be doing, but we'll continue to consult, and we've got a really good base. So looking at are you all familiar with the park site? Okay, that's good. So essentially we're looking, I was gonna say east, west, east, here? East, that's west. Yep, no, sorry. So, I'm getting totally confused. So now I'm throwing it, western entrance to the site where 94 is. Oh, 94 is the other thing that cuts the site off from everything else. Okay. And then we've got, you know, Highway 61, Burns Avenue, and then this along here is Indian Mounds, or Mounds Boulevard. So we've got some key spots where people enter the site, and so looking at what will help queue up for people to understand that they're entering this space is really important. And even once you're in the space, to understand, like, okay, feel this change in where you are and take notice. So that's a lot of what is planned for the messaging work. We also have a lot of organizational changes that need to be made. So more administrative and kind of thinking about how we are managing the site, since we are the city as the caretakers. So we need to educate ourselves and visitors about the importance of this place. Establish and nurture working relationships between the city and tribal nations. Continue partnership with Lower Phalen Creek and Walk on TV. And look at maintenance practice, including burial mounds. So mounds management plan is something that we need to work towards, so we understand what we should be doing on the mounds. We haven't been maintaining them for a little while because of the cultural landscape study, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything adverse to it, to the mounds themselves. And so we're working through kind of how does that happen? MIAC is helping to develop that plan, Dylan. So we're working collaboratively with MIAC as well as we're moving towards that. We're also looking at changing our permitting. There are birthday parties that happen there. The picnic shelters get permitted. And so is that something that should happen? What are the appropriate uses for the site, for gatherings? Like who is this for? Right? So like, is this just another park where you can come in and hold whatever kind of event you want? It's just one of those things. This is a cemetery, right? So if you think about going somewhere else and going to, if you go to some other cemetery and having a birthday party, like, is that appropriate? Probably not. So the city needs to kind of absorb some of that and start looking at what our permitting process is. There are also physical changes that I alluded to that we need to make. This lower picture is mounds, fence, and then there is sewer access. So it's extremely sad to look at. I just noticed that recently. It's like we've got utilities that are down and through the mounds. And that was, I don't know when that was done, but it's, a public works thing that happened because someone needed to make sure that we had storm sewer working through there. And again, that sign is penetrating the ground, the fence penetrates the ground. The sign that's inside there that says this is a natural area, and it's, I think it also says that these are burial mounds, is posted into the ground. So these are physical changes that we need to change to work towards amending. So taking the information from archaeophysics, we have removed sections of the trails and the pathways that are in some of the more sensitive areas so that we're not encouraging people to walk through and around them. We're also responding to the myths and the truths by changing the signage out, getting rid of that signage and putting in other signage that is, I'll get to that a little bit later, but basically remove the information that's perpetuating the lies and that's perpetuating some of the behaviors and things that are happening in the way that people are considering the site. So then we also want to make sure that we're respecting the physical site and the ancestors and the Dakotas who are here today, and everybody. So, so not just Dakotas, but also other Native American people who come to this site and who understand that it is sacred. So decommissioning the site over time is something that we're planning on doing. And some of the signage work and messaging work that we're doing now is kind of preparing for that, and to not only to let people know that this space is sacred or that this site is sacred, that they are in the entire place in a cemetery, they're on burial grounds. We also are doing that in preparation to decommission things, right? So we don't just want to add stuff to the site. That's not the intention, and that's not the right thing to do. So we'll be decommissioning it over time. That's part of the long-term plan. We've also started to, we've stopped taking donor money to put in trees with plaques or benches with plaques, because it just doesn't make sense to do that there anymore. So we have rejected people's applications to do that in this park. There are other parks where that can happen. The west parking lot is something that will change over time. It will be removed. Any removals that we're doing, the path that we removed already as part of the trail project, was done without penetrating the ground. So it's just really just taking off the layer of asphalt we have. And we essentially left the class 5 or the rock layer, base layer there, and seeded it. It's not perfect. It's still, you can tell where the trail was, but it's not the same. It's not inviting people in the same way to walk through the site and walk over the site. The other big thing is looking at roadway out that bisects the site. So trying to figure out a different way of circulation that still provides access to people's homes and, you know, we still have emergency access, but not having a road that buzzes through there.
So, which road are you speaking of?
I'm sorry, Mounds Boulevard.
Mounds Boulevard itself.
Yeah, so parts of it that we would, I can't remember exactly where, but taking out, I think, this whole part. So maybe converting some of it to being a space where people can gather, like a plaza type space. Maybe there would be emergency access, we haven't designed it, but yeah, that's the road. And so, I just want to make sure I cover this. Okay, so first physical changes that we've been making, or have been made, are what we were calling the immediate messaging plan. So if you go out there right now, you will see that there are several really well-designed signs that are along the trail on the posts that were already there. And then we've got some on the benches that have, we've got messaging on the benches. We also have messaging as seen on that first slide at the pavilion. And so that was kind of what we wanted to do to make sure that we were just setting the tone. There's also a sign added to the entrance sign that says that this is a cemetery. So you see that over to the left. And then, you know, this is a burial site. Our ancestors are still here. So we put some pretty strong messaging in there. There was stronger wording that could have been used. This was all stuff that was kind of decided upon by the groups of people that we were working with. And amazingly, we've had really good feedback about it, which I am very pleased with. When we first started this project and some of this work, we were getting pushback from the non-native people and some of the people that are immediate to this park because they feel like it's their park, it's their neighborhood park, they're used to coming here, they've been promised the things that we have in the master plan. And through some of those community conversations that we had, people started to get it. And I won't say everybody got it, but I think I was happy that we were kind of winning people over and there was this understanding that was being developed. So this is just a reminder for anybody who is there to see what this is about. So this is the landscape condition plan from the cultural landscape study. And this is much more like that first image or overview I showed you where we're trying to get back to healing the landscape and having more native ecosystems or ecotypes within the site. We also, the purple line along there was what we were considering to be the threshold of choose, thank you, which essentially was one of those things. It's like you would step over and you would realize you're walking into something, a different space. And so some of that would have been signage on benches. Some of that was planned to be just a strip of more like prairie type species, things that would be native here. I'm really not going on script at all, so hopefully I won't skip too much. This is what we are planning right now. So the immediate messaging we've gotten in. We've gotten in a lot of stuff on benches, a lot of stuff on the light posts, and the trail markers. But now we are focusing on doing some of what was in phase one, or supposed to be in phase one, so that last graphic. It's always going to depend on what we have. Those were kind of the priority projects. We can't do everything that was in that. And one of the things also I just want to point out is it's not in here, removal or preparation for removal of the airway beacon. So getting some of the information out, kind of preparing people to understand that it will be removed at some point. So that's also part of what we're doing right now, but we can't cover everything that was in that phase one plan. So we'll just keep moving forward as we get money and keep asking for money. And this is a priority for the city to just keep up and try and continue to make the changes that were outlined in the messaging plan. But we are amending the prairie that is there now. We are adding a lot of prairie to the site and taking happy, but we're trying to deter more recreational activity and try to get people to see this as a different type of space. It's not a park, it's a cemetery. And then the messaging features, I'll show you the design of these different things that have been very sensitively designed by 10 by 10. Again, working with a project advisory team, consulting with the tribal historic preservation officers. Frankie has been incredibly helpful, Frankie Jackson, as kind of the tribal liaison for the city, so that I'm not constantly, so I'm not constantly calling them and bugging them about things. If he's already calling them for something, we can kind of work in the other things that need to be responded to and find out what the best way is for the city to hear what's going on. So that's been incredibly helpful. So thank you to Lower Phalen Creek for that. This is where the gateways are, so you probably can't see us very well, especially if Chris is standing in front of us. Sorry. So one on Burns over here on the east side, and then the other one over near 94 and where Commercial Street goes down towards Bruce Bento Nature Sanctuary. So we wanted to do something, again, that let people know that they're entering into a space, people who are on the trail and people who are driving. So that's, we thought about doing some very sculptural things. We thought about a lot of different options, and we ended up doing some very special plantings. These are the ones that are over on near Commercial Street, and they're on either side of the road. And what the plan is to add soil, so we're not digging anything in, and plant with flat cedar and red willow. And then I think we're also doing prairie sage and some other native plantings. So these berms will be subtle, but people will feel them as they enter into the park. And then there's just going to be one over at the other area, but it's also a large berm, so it will be noticeable as people enter into the site. So that's just the detail for what that looks like. We wanted to make sure that we knew we couldn't dig into the ground to plant trees. So instead of doing that, we're building up this berm. Then the signage, I have a hard time calling it signage. These interpretive elements that have stories on them will be placed throughout the site. And these, again, are not going to be signage on posts that are penetrating the ground. Instead, they've been really sensitively engineered, and we've got different stories that will be on each one of them. So those are the purple spots. I don't know how well you can see them on there, but there's a grouping kind of closer to the main, the mounds that are fenced in. And then there are some a little bit further down from there as you go down the hill, so towards the west side. But the different stories are origins of the people, mounds, truths and myths. I can't see. Matapaha, and the Nagpra and the mounds history, and then Matakaway, which you're going to have to tell me again at some point how to actually say that. So we've got different stories that we are working on. There are some co-developers that are helping with that, and then we've got some others who are going to help us with the interpretation. So they will be in, they'll be very similarly designed and shaped, the circle with have 4 quadrants, a design on them, a pattern, artwork, and then it will say what the overall kind of title of the story is, and it will be in English and Dakota. And we heard that it was really important to not quarry rock for this, that we should find rock that's already out of the ground. And so what we're doing is reusing rock that came, I think, mostly from our Public Works Bridges division. We've got a stockpile of it over off of Pierce Butler. And so 10 by 10, and I went over, so Katie and Maura and I have all been out to that site to look at the rocks, to see which ones would be best, talk to people about, talk to some of our partners about what type of rock should we have a lot of granite, should we use granite? And I think we ended up using all limestone, some of it's pink, some of it's yellow. But the idea was we don't want to cut stone, We also don't want to penetrate the stone. We don't want to drill into it. We don't want to have any type of fasteners in it. So we 10 by 10 modeled what the stones are, and so they can figure out where to place them in the landscape. Again, this is kind of what we're doing with them. So we've got 3 of them that are going along the trail that have this detail where it's got the sign of the actual story on it. And then the one in the lower left-hand corner is where we got the airway beacon sign. So it's adding something to that sign to tell the story about NAGPRA and about what the site really is. And it'll have a picture of it, what we would have, what you see there, and it really sets it up so you see the airway beacon in this picture and a mound. And it's like, hopefully people will see this is wrong. People are really attached to that airway beacon. There are a lot of people that love it, and they feel like it's a great spot, it's a good marker of where the neighborhood is, and we see it differently than that now. So, and then we've got where the fence is around the mound, we're adding another story there, and then the sacred bowl or offerings. This is the sign that I was talking about. So this is the current airway beacon, and then this is what we're going to add on the top of that. So people can see what is there right now and understand why that might be coming out. Overall, this is a more detailed messaging plan. I don't know if I have that in there twice or if this is slightly different. And I wanted to also talk about decommissioning the pavilion. So the pavilion is that large brick structure that is there, and the idea is that over time, I mean, not only are we going to get money incrementally, we're also we're getting money to take things away incrementally. And I think it's logically it's what we can do with the money that we have, but I think it's also beneficial because it will be a slow change that people will see. Like, I would love to just like rip the Band-Aid off, but we can't afford to do that. So hopefully we can do this in a way that is telling the story to people as time goes by. But you can see the roof is off. Again, I think we've got flat cedar and red willow planted in there with other native plants. So it's kind of looking more like a relic or something that's being taken over by nature and the landscape. We've got several next steps that we are working on currently. Frankie and I have been working on doing some agreements so that we understand how to work with the tribal historic preservation officers, because we know we're obligated to consult with them on a lot of things. We also want to make sure that we are going, since it's government to government, that we are going to them to find out like, what do you want us to go ahead and do? What things with us just telling you about, what things do you want to be part of making decisions about? What things do you need to have more of a formal consultation? And what things do you want to be present for? If we're making like physical changes to the landscape, if there's construction work happening, and I say that in parentheses because we know now we can't dig, right? We're not going to penetrate the ground, but still, if somebody wants to be present to do some oversight of that, we want to make sure that the TIBOs have that understanding. And so that's something else. And again, I can't read this very well. Cemetery delineation, the mounds management plan, which I talked about before. So that the partnership formalization, we're going to continue making changes to the landscape, and then we're also looking very closely at maintenance. So we've got the mound maintenance, but we've also got other maintenance that has to happen not on the mounds. So it's not just about changing the mounds to prairie or changing the rest of the landscape to prairie. It's also about like what kind of machinery can we use if we're mowing? Like what do we do if there's a tree that's falling down? How do we take that down? We're not going to grind the stump. So like there are all these things that we're now looking at and understanding and we think about them differently than we have. And then site naming. One of the reasons that we have the addition to the sign in Indian Mounds Regional Park, it says this is a cemetery, is because we know that this is going to be renamed. And we don't have that process in place right now. It will probably happen along with Bruce Bento Nature Sanctuary. It wasn't something that the tribal historic preservation officers we're prioritizing, so they wanna make sure we're being very careful about it and very, just very careful and intentional in how we do that. So that is something that will be a welcome change. I know that we talked about not having a state park and not tiling the park. The other thing is that we're working on co-management ideas and plans. So working with Lower Phalen on how we can share some of the maintenance work and the caring for the sites, so that there is not just the city's not like in control, but we're working together and kind of filling in gaps. So that's kind of there was a conversation, you know, people have talked about land back, and I think this is kind of a step, right, towards that. If that is something that is wanted, not by the city, but I'm not saying we're in control. We're understanding that we shouldn't be. But the idea of co-management is maybe something that's a little more feasible for all the parties at this point in time. That's it. I really took up a long time for me, but hopefully this was helpful to understand what's happening. I don't know if people have specific questions, but I know that we wanted to have a discussion as well. So I'm going to defer to you on how you want to.
Any questions for her?
Too many.
It's a lot of information to
It
digest,
is.
so I just want to put that out there for folks who might be like new to the cultural landscape study. So this is, again, something that Ellen has been involved in since at least 2010, and different work at the mound site. Something that myself and Lower Phalen Creek Project as an organization have been involved in since I want to say 2015, 16, somewhere around there. So, you know, I was playing on my phone a little bit because I'm like, oh, I've already heard this presentation so many times. I like know all this, but I also, it's a lot, and it's like really big and important stuff. So, also the city has a web page dedicated to like all of the community engagement that's happened, all of the meeting notes to this date, like the digital format of this cultural landscape study, and we have hard copies of the cultural landscape study here. So definitely, you know, I think it took me like a while to like process so much of the information when I first started getting involved in this project. So
It is a lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
And it's been great.
Yeah.
It has. It's been really good to see the progress. So we're going to continue having meetings with other departments to make sure that they're understanding more about what's in our city.
Right.
There's a lot of really important work that has to happen. Thank you.
What we're gonna do